Last month, War of the Rohirrim premiered with lackluster performance. With a budget of $30 million, The War of the Rohirrim only grossed a little more than $18 million worldwide, and was pulled from theaters after only 2 weeks. So, what went wrong? Why didn't War of the Rohirrim succeed? Some of you might be thinking the answer is obvious, considering how other recent Tolkien adaptations have turned out. Obviously, that piece of Tolkien fanfiction was not the resounding success Amazon needed it to be, in great part because of its egregious mishandling of Tolkien lore. But that is not the case with The War of the Rohirrim. Unlike The Rings of Power, War of the Rohirrim sticks closely to the story that Tolkien tells in Appendix A of Return of the King. The basic story is unchanged, with a few embellishments for dramatic purposes or to flesh out the story. For instance, the Dunlanders probably did not have Mumakil, but they were supported by Haradrim mercenaries, and the Mumakil do make for an exciting addition to the story. Same thing goes with the Eagles, or the idea of Hera and Wolf being childhood friends. The only example of this embellishment that I dislike is the Watcher in the water. There is no reason for there to be a creature like this in a random patch of woods in Rohan. But all in all, War of the Rohirrim is pretty faithful to the source material and consistent with Tolkien's vision. I think there are several reasons that contributed to the movie's poor performance. The first being the weakness of the main character, Hera, Helm's daughter. The fact that Hera was the main character of the film rather than Helm was probably the biggest point of contention around this movie. I saw many complaints that Helm was getting pushed out of his own story. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with Hera being the main character for a couple of reasons. For one, sometimes it's better to view a larger-than-life character like Helm through the eyes of someone more relatable. But probably more importantly, the film needed to appeal to as many people as possible in order to make money. So if you want to draw in women who aren't already Tolkien fanatics, it makes sense to center the story around a woman instead of a mythical, larger-than-life hero like Helm Hammerhand. The real question is, does this version of Hera work as the protagonist? Unfortunately, she doesn't quite pull it off, but not for the reason you might think. I had my concerns about her when the trailer first came out, but after watching the movie, I did not think that Hera was a quote-unquote girl boss who could do no wrong and was just inexplicably better than every man in the show. She is plucky and strong-willed and a good fighter, but she's not all-powerful. The biggest issue with Hera is that she feels like a copy and paste of Éowyn from The Lord of the Rings. It's difficult to view Hera as anything but a red-haired Éowyn. Both are skilled female warriors who are strong-willed and fight alongside men against the wishes of their kings, and their personalities are pretty much the same to boot as well. Red hair aside, the only perceivable difference between them is that Hera does not want to get married ever, but wants to remain free to follow her dreams or something like that. This, along with her complaints about having no say in her marriage, make her feel like a modern feminist interpretation of Éowyn, or an insertion into the medieval fantasy world of The Lord of the Rings. Hera isn't a bad protagonist, and she doesn't wreck the film, but she doesn't sell the film either. No one who saw this movie went to see it for Hera. We all went to see it for Helm. But Hera is not the only rip-off character in The War of the Rohirrim. Her cousin Freyaloth has the exact same story arc as Éomer in Peter Jackson's version of The Two Towers. Like Éomer, he is the king's nephew who is banished from the realm even though he's loyal to the king. He returns and leads an epic cavalry charge to save the forces at Helm's Deep, and becomes the new king of Rohan when his uncle dies. Both Hera and Freyaloth feel like copy and pasted characters, and it feels like the writers were either being lazy or just rushed and didn't have enough time to come up with something original. Besides having a weak protagonist and copy-pasted characters, the animation also failed to sell the film. I thought the animation was overall just mediocre. Nothing looked bad, but nothing looked great either. And all in all, the animation is forgettable because it plays it so safe that it doesn't do anything unique or creative. The character art style is very generic, and the action sequences were all very grounded, but ultimately forgettable. Even the way characters moved outside of action sequences felt subdued somehow, like the animation team was told to tone things way down. My guess is that the animators were instructed to keep things down to earth to stay within the serious tone of The Lord of the Rings, but I think they took it a bit too far. At least other cartoon adaptations of Tolkien have a unique art style that's fun to look at. It seems like the reason for the rushed or lazy character writing and the bland animation is that the movie was something of a rushed project, not intended to make lots of money, but to allow Warner Brothers to maintain the film rights to The Lord of the Rings while they focus their attention on the hunt for Gollum. Frankly, I think this is a shame. The story of Helm Hammerhand is a much better foundation for a film than the quest for Gollum, so I can't say I expect great things from the Hunt for Gollum films. For all its weaknesses, I still think War of the Rohirrim is an enjoyable movie and a decent Tolkien adaptation. The movie does a great job with Helm, and though I think it missed a few opportunities to put in some amazing lines from the book, I felt very satisfied with how the movie portrayed him. Something else I appreciated was the way this movie portrayed the difference in ethnicity between the Rohirrim and the Dunlanders, specifically with Freka and Wolf. Remember how in the Rings of Power, each and every group of people is a hodgepodge of different ethnicities with no consistency or explanation as to how that could be in-world? It was refreshing to see the War of the Rohirrim not follow in that modern Hollywood trope. Filmmakers outside of the West don't tend to get stuck on the same tropes about race as Americans, so the influence of Japanese director Kenji Kamiyama, as well as Peter Jackson and his team from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, were probably a positive influence in this case. For some reason, Freyalaf has darker skin as well, so there is some inconsistency on this point. But otherwise, this is how ethnic diversity should be done in film. By all means, include different ethnic groups. Just do it in a way that makes sense for the world you're working in. For more on this point, check out my previous video on the Rings of Power. That's going to do it this time, folks. What did you think of the War of the Rohirrim? Tell me what you liked or disliked about the movie in the comments, and if you agree or disagree with my video. And if you like what you heard, please help me out by liking, subscribing, and sharing with a friend. And thanks so much for watching. It really does mean a lot.